In this lecture, we want to share with you the 8 depth of goals that we use when we plan our classes and when we communicate our expectations with our students. This idea of depth of goals is designed so that we can be clear about what ability we expect from our students, how much time to spend in each class, and what type of feedback our students can expect to receive from us at that moment. The first goal type on our list is awareness. For any movement or concept that we might want our students to eventually learn, awareness simply means that our students know that it exists. You might take a minute or two to show a video, tell a story, or demonstrate an idea, but without having the students even trying out for themselves. Or they might indeed try it out briefly with you just because having that brief physical interaction with it will make it more memorable. Notice the word brief here. Keeping the interaction very short, a minute or two at most, will help your students keep the goal in perspective. If you spend any longer, then they will shift towards a different goal of achieving some proficiency with the topic. If you at this stage do choose to ask your students to engage physically with the topic, you typically would not provide them with any type of feedback. Just as spending more time on the topic will shift the students' perceived goal away from awareness, giving students feedback also makes them feel pressure to be able to execute on an idea with some proficiency. Otherwise, why would you give them the feedback? Of course, it can be very tempting to provide feedback, and students might even actively ask you for it. But if indeed your goal is simply awareness, then we encourage you to resist the urge and let the students know that this isn't the time for the details. They just need to learn that the topic exists and that you will return to it another time. You can think of an awareness goal as planting a seed in your students' mind, something to come back to and nourish at a later time. When you bring it up again in the future, your aim is that your students feel that it's vaguely familiar, but there's no expectations that they'll have any understanding or ability connected to it. You can easily embed one or several of such awareness goals inside of each class as a way to help add important information that should make it into your students' worldview. The next type of goal is understanding. Our minds can often understand a concept and an idea much faster than our bodies can execute them. You spend just enough time on the movement or concept so that your students have a chance to form a basic understanding of what it is. As in awareness, they might also engage with it physically, although the physical ability is not the goal. The amount of time taken for understanding will be only just a little longer than awareness, and the amount of feedback should also be fairly small. The type of feedback we give for this type of goal is related to helping them recognize something. For example, you want to introduce a move that has a certain rhythm. You can spend some time with your students scatting and dancing this move. If your students have tried scatting the rhythm with you a few times, perhaps scatting along while they watch you dance the move, they've already reached an understanding goal. Using different depths of goals is a powerful way to develop skill over time. For example, if you work with the same students over several weeks, in week 1, you might have your primary focus on one type of movement, but you can also start planting seeds for 1 or 2 movements in parallel. For these other movements, your goal could be for your students to just understand the movement in this week, but return to them in the following weeks to start developing the skills. So the same movement can and probably should have different goals attached to them from week to week or month to month. The understanding goal allows you to introduce an idea, but not spend more than a few minutes of class time on it. If you simply want your students to gain a little understanding of a new concept, then you will also not give much feedback, if any at all. And any feedback you do give to your students isn't aimed to produce high quality. Rather, it's purely there to help them build a little familiarity with the idea. Keep it in broad strokes, saving the details techniques for another time. Some students will need to be reminded what the goal is because they've changed expectations in their own minds and will think that they've failed the task if they're not dancing the movement perfectly. This can result in a lot of frustration for those students. When these frustrations happen, it's an excellent opportunity to remind them of what the goal is. Explain that you'll get back to it over time and help them also to develop comfort with failure, which is a crucial skill to develop on its own. The third depth of goal is called experience. Here, we ask our students to just try something out without having any expectations of succeeding. With an experience goal, we might demonstrate a complex move or give a short explanation of the concept and throw the students in the deep end of the pool, so to speak, by asking them to just try it out without much information. We might do this a few times. We demonstrate the movements twice and immediately put on music and let our students just try it out by themselves 3 or 4 times, either without any additional explanations at all, or with just a bare minimum of hint to nudge them in the right direction. We might repeat this several times. There's typically no feedback involved, and the whole process could take between 5 to 10 minutes. Often, we follow up this experience phase of the class with another depth of goals. You see, you can have the goal change for the same movements also within the same class. You can start something with an experience goal and then progress to an ability goal after that. What's important here is to be clear with your students about what kind of goal you're setting for that moment, what ability you're expecting to see from them, and what kind of feedback that they can expect from you. In our local classes, our students are very familiar with this approach, so they know not to panic when we just demonstrate something twice and let them try it out without any additional information. In fact, they get this tingling anticipation whether they can make it or not, so it's exciting. However, at workshops, we notice that many students have a moment of panic because they're not used to it, so that tingling effect goes over to panic rather, and they worry that this brief information or demonstration is all the help they'll get for this movement and that we expect them to get it right immediately. Again, this illustrates that the unspoken agreement you make with your students also includes a teaching process they're used to getting from you. When we apply a new process, we simply have to explain it a bit more beforehand to help our students set a new expectation. Okay, back to the experience goal. There are many reasons for why we use experience goals in almost every class. One aspect that is perhaps not so obvious has to do with how different cultures learn dance in the first place. As a child, growing up in a family who loves dancing, I never had dance lessons at home. I was just watching and copying. My parents encouraged me to explore and just be involved. There was an attitude of, you'll figure it out. A very common skill among Iranians, for example, is their ability to snap our finger in a way that is a lot louder than finger snapping. It looks like this, and it's called a Beshkan. The basic principle is exactly the same way as any other snapping. You create a cavity and you apply force to it, and that's the same thing here. You lock your fingers in and then you have a cavity here and you apply force to it and you get that loud sound that we love in snapping. But no one sat us down and gave us theories or step-by-step methodologies. Lock your thumb under your hand and support each finger with the same finger on the opposite hand and close their thumb around and snap, so to say, to create that. Nobody sat us down in detail. Of course, you look at it a little bit, but after that, it was just about exploration and figuring out. And it took me 3 months of persistent training and trying it out, maybe checking back with my sister and cousins to see how they do it. But eventually I did figure it out. In my years of teaching, I've noticed that, especially in the context of dance classes, that seems to be a very unfamiliar way of learning dance in many other cultures. One of our students once joked saying, in Germany, we don't take a single step until we've read 3 books about it. Now, to be clear, I'm not touting that one approach is better than the other. But what I want to express is that there are different philosophies to learning, and our mindsets towards both learning and actually dancing a dance is strongly influenced by how we learn and think about it. It influences what's going on through our minds as we dance, and it influences how we explore boundaries and much more. What we tend to do is to try to make sure that we include both what we think our students need and should have as their learning methodologies, as well as what they believe they need in order to progress. Meaning, often, we help them learn and appreciate a new way of learning the dance that is closer to the roots of the dance, but we also have moments where we use methodologies that are more familiar to our students to help them get through something they find difficult. This is actually a great time for us to give a shout out to Carita Griffith-Walker. One of the many things she shared in her excellent Roots, Rhythm, Race, and Dance Teachers program is the idea of helping our students cross a metaphoric river. If they are used to one way of learning and we feel that this dance culturally requires another way, we have a choice to make. We could simply stay on their side of the river to keep learning easy, but this will never help them to get across. Or we can demand that they find their own way to get on our side of the river, but this can really leave them frustrated and potentially lose students who don't feel they know how to do that. Or we can create little stepping stones. They'll have to take little jumps, little leaps of faith, but they'll gradually make it across the river. Moving on. Another reason we use experience goals in almost all our classes is that it allows us to see where students are in their ability to learn this movement before embarking on a more detailed plan. Perhaps they already know how to do it. Perhaps many of them are already almost there and just need a little refinement. Perhaps you see that the group is extremely mixed in their ability, or possibly you notice that they are much less experienced than you expected and you need to change your plans quickly. You might notice a fast learner who could, with perhaps a little support from you, already get the concept right. Then you can focus on helping this person reach a higher ability goal throughout the class, while others are aiming for the more basic ability goal. Or you use it as a way for all your students to build some familiarity with the movement in one class, but really focus on the teaching of the movement in the following class. Just having tried the movement a couple of times and returning to it again later helps a lot with building muscle memory. We gain so much insight and value from an experience-driven exercise that it is our go-to starting point at almost every teaching situation. The fourth depth of goal is called explore. This is when we want to give our students a chance to figure things out independently and to discover what works for them. The important distinction here is that we are not asking them to reproduce something we've demonstrated. Rather, we want them to actively go in a direction they choose or find ways to reach a goal that they come up with for themselves. This kind of training helps our students develop independence and even discover their own voices as dancers. As teachers, when we work on explore goals, we want to make it clear that we will not give feedback that corrects their choices. In fact, we need to be very careful as teachers not to fall into the temptation of doing that. During an explore task, we simply walk around and encourage students to explore outside of their comfort zone and celebrate the discoveries. At most, we might ask them questions to spark thinking and exploration without tempting them to copy us. Many teachers wish for their students to develop their own voices as dancers, but almost all the experiences they create in class are about copying the teacher. If we call back to the previous lecture, the unspoken agreement happens between the lines. If you don't create many opportunities for your students to explore for themselves, they will become dependent and only strive to be good at what seems to be expected of them. We want to also make it clear that explore is a goal type that works at any experience level. You can use this for your beginner all the way to your more advanced students. Maybe for the beginners, you spend just a few minutes here and there, while for your most experienced dancers, you can spend as much time as you want with this goal type. But if you manage to add this type of exercise already from day one of your students' experience with you, it is something that will make it into their worldview. The next four goal types are based on developing levels of ability. For these, we have basic, intermediate, advanced, and mastery. Of course, there's no specific need to split things exactly this way. You can adjust the definitions to whatever works best for you. But we work with the following definitions. We define basic ability as something that our students are able to succeed at only some of the times. It's something that exists strongly enough that they attempt it, practice it, and use it as part of their active vocabulary, but their success rates are still low. For intermediate ability, we're expecting them to succeed most of the time at medium quality. We think of this as something our students get right most of the time, but often some element of it is not quite there yet. For example, their rhythm is a bit off. The transition from one movement into another isn't quite right, or for partner dancing, the connection with their partner is sometimes not working for that movement. But most of the time, you can clearly see that it is the movement you ask them to do. For advanced ability, we expect them to be able to repeat the movement at a refined level in most situations. It should work to most songs they dance to and in most situations, for instance in partner dancing, with most partners. For mastery, we expect the movements to be second nature. They would only fail to execute the movements with great rhythm, beautiful shapes, and musical timing in very rare cases. However, at this point, if it hasn't happened already, dancers who execute at this level should be minimizing how much they learn from one single teacher and rather seek mentorship from the elders of the dance and themselves go deeper into building a profound understanding of everything that makes the dance what it is, while also refining their own interpretation of it. Of course, the type of feedback we give for any of these ability goals should be directly related to the degree of ability we're expecting from our students. If we want to give feedback at a different level, then we should tell them this explicitly. For instance, in our earlier example of a fast learner, when we approach them to give extra feedback, we might say something like, It looks like you're comfortable with this movement already, so if you like, I can give you something extra to think about. We talk a lot about feedback in several of our lessons on our online program over at swingstep.com/teacher, and we would love it if you check that out as well. We want to make a final note about different ability goals. It's often the case that teachers focus on more concrete things, such as moves, but spend less attention on thinking about how to deliver the abstract topics, such as our students' ability to connect to and play with the music, or the ability to improvise and creatively express themselves at various levels of difficulty. We want to encourage you to think about these topics in the same way as more concrete move-based ones. For example, what does a basic ability to react to musical phrasing look like? Or an advanced ability to improvise? So let's look at these 8 different types of depth of goals at one glance. We had awareness, understanding, experience, explore, basic ability, intermediate ability, advanced ability, and mastery. Depth of goals 1 through 3 might only take a couple of seconds or minutes out of your class, but they are extremely powerful tools to help your students build an effective worldview that can serve them greatly as a dancer, as you get to seed many different ideas early on in their learning process. We recommend that you aim to have a few of these moments in each class you teach, especially early on. Explore goals, as we discussed earlier, should also be a regular part of your classes. For beginners, those experiences might be very short, while they might be the main focus of a class for the more experienced dancers. The ability-based goals 5 through 8 often form the bulk of your lessons and can take entire seasons and realistically often a lifetime to complete. Using these 8 depth of goals types allows you and your students to have a much clearer set of vocabulary to communicate what you're looking for at each moment of the class. Remember in lecture 3, we talked about compiling a list of structures you want your students to learn. If you complement each item on the list with the depth of goals you would like to achieve, you'll have a much better understanding of the time that should be allotted for it. In this way, you can set different goals for different topics, or even different goals for the same topic within a class, and have your students on board with you at all times. The more you communicate these goals with your students, the more your unspoken agreements become explicit. So we hope you'll explore these ideas in your next teaching opportunities. Meanwhile, in the next lecture, we're going to take all the different skills we learned so far and put them together into a process that will help you continuously improve as a teacher. We call this process the cycle of teaching, and whenever you're ready, join us there.